My name is Rebecca Vaughn, and the moment that still burns in my chest happened at my father's Navy retirement ceremony in Norfolk, Virginia, spring of 2022. I arrived early, the air crisp with salt from the Chesapeake. The base was alive with banners brass and the murmured pride of families gathered to celebrate the man they called a legend, Admiral Samuel Vaughn, my father. The man who'd decided long ago that I didn't belong in his legacy. When I reached the gate, the young sailor scanned the guest list, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the list." The words didn't surprise me, not after the silence that followed my husband's death. Not after my father's lawyers tried to cut me out of the Vaughn Veterans Foundation, the one I had helped build. But standing there, hearing it said out loud, still stung. Through the security glass, I saw him, medals, gleaming smile, perfectly rehearsed, surrounded by officers. His eyes met mine, cool and assessing, before sliding past like I was a stranger. That single glance said it all. "You don't exist here, Rebecca." I turned toward the parking lot, steady, quiet. From the trunk of my car, I lifted a small wooden box, the one that held Ethan's seal trident, my late husband's insignia polished by years of service. I placed it on the seat beside me and waited. Inside the hall, the ceremony began. Speeches, laughter, applause. Until one man, Captain Avery, Ethan's former commanding officer, stepped to the podium. "Before we close," he said, voice cutting through the chatter, "there's someone this Navy should never have erased." The doors opened behind him. I walked in. 300 Navy SEALs, men and women who had served with Ethan, who had seen the truth my father ignored, rose to their feet. The sound of their boots striking the floor echoed like thunder through the hall. No one spoke. Cameras flashed. My father's smile faltered. I saluted. "Sir Commander Vaughn, retired." "Present." The room went silent. For the first time in years, I saw it, not pride, not anger, but shame flicker in my father's eyes. They tried to cut me out. But 300 warriors stood up and reminded the world who I am. Not my brother. No one. What they had erased from the guest list was nothing compared to what they were about to see written on my shoulders. 3 stars earned through 15 years of service, silence, and sacrifice. Medals couldn't explain what they meant, but today they would. Norfolk was a city that breathed the Navy. The air itself hummed with brass bands, flag ceremonies, and the distant call of ships sliding out to sea. The Navy wasn't just a career here. It was a heritage, a bloodline passed down like scripture. And my father, Admiral Samuel Vaughn, wore that heritage as if it were divinely his. In our community, his name commanded reverence, his uniform, obedience. My brother Jason had inherited both his confidence and his ambition. From the moment he could stand at attention, people called him the next Vaughn to make admiral. He was bold, magnetic, effortlessly heroic. My father's pride revolved around him like a sun. I was different. I preferred the shadows of intelligence briefings and encrypted reports, the quiet work that protected lives without parades or applause. I found strength in precision, not volume, resolve, not rhetoric. But in our household, that kind of strength didn't count. I still remember a summer afternoon when my father laughed with his peers over bourbon and barbecue. "Rebecca's bright, but Jason, he's the real warrior." I was 16, standing behind the screen door, pretending not to hear. The words branded themselves into my spine. Years later, when Jason's Naval Academy acceptance letter arrived, the house exploded with celebration banners, champagne, a brass quartet borrowed from the base. That same week, I'd been notified I'd cracked a communication cipher that prevented a foreign infiltration. My father's response had been a nod and 5 words. "That's good, Rebecca. But it's not command." Those moments built a wall taller than rank, thicker than pride. In every family photo, the pattern repeated: my father centered Jason gleaming beside him, my mother smiling proudly, and me half in frame, half forgotten. So I forged my own path through the corridors of naval intelligence, behind sealed doors and glowing monitors. My battlefield was unseen but no less real. and though they'd erased my name from the guest list today, they'd soon see it stitched above my heart, gleaming under those 3 silver stars. There was Iron Shield, the operation that kept me awake for 36 straight hours as we unraveled a cyber attack aimed at crippling a carrier strike group. If we had failed, 5,000 sailors could have been left adrift blind in hostile waters. We succeeded, and the carrier sailed on business as usual. No one ever knew. Then there was Silent Echo. A SEAL team was trapped behind enemy lines, their comms jammed, time running out. I rerouted a satellite from another theater, buying them the coverage they needed to escape. They made it back alive, but no one asked how. Their survival was chalked up to luck. I was never part of the story. And Midnight Falcon, a freighter disguised in the Pacific carrying radioactive cargo that could have sparked an international disaster. With MI6 and the Royal Australian Navy, I coordinated the intercept, neutralized the threat, and kept it out of the headlines. When dawn broke over the ocean, the world never even knew how close it had come to chaos. The medals that followed were locked in drawers. The commendations came in sealed envelopes. My proudest possession wasn't a ribbon or a signature, but a single handwritten note from a SEAL I'd never met. "We're alive because of you." A man never forgets that. I kept it tucked away in a drawer, proof that my work mattered even when no one said it aloud. Pride lived in me, yes, but it was accompanied by a profound loneliness. Because while I carried those victories, I could never share them with the people who should have mattered most. My father, my mother, my brother, none of them ever knew. To them, I was just the daughter who pushed papers behind a desk. And that was the cruelest twist of all. The very ceremonies they celebrated, the legacies they boasted about, were often possible because of work done in the shadows. My work. I slipped quietly into the hall at Naval Station Norfolk, keeping to the dim edge of the back row. My uniform stayed folded in the trunk of my car. For now, I wore plain clothes, invisible among the polished whites and blues. The space was hushed, and reverent banners hanging from the high ceiling medals gleaming under the lights. Every detail screamed ceremony, tradition, pride. The master of ceremonies cleared his throat and launched into a glowing speech about the Vaughn family, calling us a model of naval legacy. The words made my stomach twist. Applause thundered as Jason stood in his dress whites, broad smile shining, the picture-perfect officer my father had always paraded. Each clap felt like a hammer striking down the message that he, and only he, carried the Vaughn name forward. When the MC spoke of all the children of Admiral Samuel Vaughn, my name never passed his lips. The omission wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, rehearsed. My chest burned as whispers rippled around me. Rebecca. Isn't she the one who just does office work? She's not really Navy, not like her brother. Each word sliced deeper than any reprimand. Every whisper reminded me that my own family had edited me out of their legacy. Then, almost imperceptibly, a different murmur reached me from a few rows ahead. A cluster of younger officers leaned toward one another, lowering their voices. "I've seen her name before. In a classified report. Rebecca Vaughn." Could it be her disbelief and recognition? For the first time, I realized there were cracks in the wall my father had built to keep me invisible. People outside this family knew, even if they could never say it aloud. But the deepest cut came when I spotted a folder carelessly left on a side table near the aisle. Ceremony programs and agenda, a few internal notes, nothing unusual. Until my eyes landed on one page. Internal correspondence, guest list revision, and at the bottom, Samuel R. Vaughn. His handwriting was unmistakable. Omit Rebecca Vaughn. Do not detract from Jason's recognition. It wasn't an oversight. It was an order. My father hadn't just forgotten me, he had erased me by choice. The burn of betrayal spread through my chest, but beneath it something else stirred. Anger, sharp and alive, pressing against the edges of humiliation until it turned into clarity. I refused to let them keep writing this story without me. I stood quietly and stepped into the hallway. The air outside was cooler, calmer, but not enough to drown out the voices coming from around the corner. My brother's voice. "If Rebecca shows up," Jason whispered to another officer, "she'll take everything from me. She always has." His tone wasn't arrogant this time, it was fearful. The friend standing beside him didn't respond, just gave a tight, uneasy smile. That look on Jason's face, tight jaw, darting eyes, told me more than words could. He wasn't proud. He wasn't dismissive. He was afraid. And in that moment, I finally understood. My father's legacy wasn't built on strength. It was built on control. And my brother wasn't trying to live up to it. He was trying to survive it. I slid my hand into the pocket of my coat, fingers brushing against the folded letter I had carried for years, a note from a seal whose life I'd saved long ago. The ink was smudged now, but the words never lost their weight. "We're alive because of you." A man never forgets that. My grip tightened around the paper. I whispered under my breath, "The truth doesn't need me to shout. It will speak for itself." The pain of their betrayal settled deeper, but so did my clarity. They didn't want me here because they knew. If I stepped into the light, I would eclipse them without saying a single word. And that was exactly what I intended to do. The wind off the Virginia Beach shoreline swept through the parking lot, carrying salt ocean and the faint cry of distant gulls. I opened the car door and slid inside the muffled ceremony beyond the walls, fading into silence. The garment bag lay across the seat untouched until now. I unzipped it with deliberate calm, revealing the pristine white of my dress uniform. Every crease, every polished edge spoke of the discipline that had defined me, the very strength my family had chosen to overlook. I buttoned each clasp slowly, sealing every slight and dismissal into the fabric. When I pinned the 3 silver stars onto my shoulders, the weight no longer felt like burden. It felt like proof. The mirror caught my reflection, and for the first time, I didn't see the daughter left off the guest list or the sister cropped from family photos. I saw Rear Admiral Rebecca Vaughn. My phone vibrated on the console, a secure coded message. I opened it quickly. "We know they didn't invite you. Remember, your presence matters more than they want to admit." The words struck deeper than any metal. My superiors knew. They saw. They wanted me there, even when my own blood didn't. I drew in a deep breath, hand brushing the stars on my shoulder. "Not for revenge," I whispered. "For truth." Then I opened the door. The wind caught my cover as I stepped out back toward the hall. Inside, the master of ceremonies' voice rose proud, rehearsed, announcing Admiral Samuel Vaughn. 100 uniforms gleamed under the light's rows of precision and pride. And then, as the doors swung shut behind me, all eyes turned. A ripple tore through the quiet. I walked forward, each step deliberate, the click of my heels striking the polished floor like a metronome of reckoning. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. At first, no one quite believed what they were seeing. Then a single voice, deep gravel, edged and commanding, cut through the silence. It came from the 3rd row, a Navy SEAL, older, battle-worn, the lines on his face carved by time and fire. He had been there on Operation Silent Echo, the mission where my decision had saved his team from annihilation. His chair scraped back as he rose, shoulders squared. Admiral Vaughn, front row. For a heartbeat, the hall froze. Then the wave began. One man, then another. Then, all at once. 300 SEALs stood in perfect unison, the thunder of their chairs slamming back, echoing like cannon fire. The sound rolled through the hall, sharp, reverent, unstoppable. It rattled the chandeliers, shattered the stillness, and left the MC standing paralyzed behind his podium. The microphone slipped from his trembling hands, hitting the floor with a shriek that cut through the applause. The script in his palm fluttered uselessly to the carpet. I turned my gaze toward the front. My father, Admiral Samuel Vaughn, was frozen mid-toast, the crystal glass hovering inches from his lips. The color drained from his face as he stared at me across the sea of uniforms. Beside him, my brother Jason looked stricken, as if the very floor beneath him had given way. His lips parted, but no sound emerged, just the wide-eyed shock of a man watching the truth dismantle everything he'd ever believed. I kept walking, slow, steady, each step a declaration. The silver stars on my shoulders caught the light with every movement, scattering it across the hall like fragments of truth. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The hall that had always been theirs, their legacy, their pride shifted with every stride. By the time I reached the front row, the silence had become a living thing. 300 seals stood locked in salute. The air vibrated with the unspoken. I turned, lowered myself into the empty chair beside my father, and folded my hands calmly on my lap. I didn't need a speech. The story was already written across the stars gleaming on my shoulders and reflected in every pair of eyes now watching me. Truth had arrived, and it was wearing my name. Finally, a 3-star admiral leaned close. His words were meant only for me. If it weren't for you, ceremonies like this wouldn't even exist. His voice was even, but the gratitude in his eyes cut through me sharper than applause ever could. From the corner of my vision, I saw my father, Admiral Samuel Vaughn, frozen mid-motion, the wine glass trembling slightly in his hand, as though he couldn't decide whether to hold it or let it fall. My brother Jason sat hunched forward, gaze fixed on the floor, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. Their silence roared louder than any speech that had once erased me. I folded my cover neatly into my lap posture, unflinching face, calm. I didn't rise to speak, didn't offer an explanation or defense. I didn't need to. Sitting there fully seen, fully undeniable was the answer they had spent decades trying to avoid. Then it came. A single clap. Hesitant. Then another. Then a swell. Applause built in waves, not prompted by a master of ceremonies or tradition, but drawn out by something deeper truth revealed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. For the first time, the story couldn't move forward without me at its center. As the ceremony ended, people lingered. Whispers followed me like a current. Jason approached first, his voice trembling. "How long have you been hiding this? 15 years, I said evenly. The number landed between us like an anchor. He staggered back, exhaling his pride, cracking into something almost human. Then my father came. He didn't speak. His eyes traced the stars on my shoulders, the seams of the uniform he'd once said I'd never earn. His hand twitched around the glass, but after a long, taut pause, he gave one slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't an apology. It didn't erase decades. But it was acknowledgement, real, undeniable. 6 months later, I was back in Norfolk. The house looked the same, but something had changed. The glass cabinet that once held Jason's Academy portrait now displayed one of my medals. The ribbon caught the light, steady and proud. At dinner, my father asked about leading intelligence teams across continents. My mother smiled softly. Jason sat silent, humbled. Driving home under the Virginia night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No shadow, no doubt, just clarity. The greatest acknowledgement never came from them. It had always been within me, and that night, I finally claimed it. There's a strength that comes from being unseen for too long, the kind that doesn't shout, but endures. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel small, then you already understand my story. I stood my ground, not for revenge, but for recognition, and maybe my fight reminds you of your own. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to prove your worth to people who doubted you? What did that moment teach you? Share your advice below, not just for me, but for everyone who's still learning that acknowledgement starts within. And don't forget, subscribe if you believe truth always finds its voice.